During this railway adventure, England's Coney Island, mighty midget locomotives, scenery that inspired Wordsworth, 4 special railways, and a tramway that lights up the night. Hi, I'm Bernie Coppell. Just up the tracks, a tramway that might have inspired Disney's Electric Light Parade. Join me from Alston to Blackpool on Railway Adventures Across Europe.
Journey across the globe, from Scotland to China, with world's greatest train ride videos. Experience the breathtaking thrill and adventure of authentic train travel as you follow the tracks to unique history, fascinating people, and breathtaking scenery. All aboard!
Just off Britain's M6 highway, we'll take several railway excursions on some beautifully restored lines which were once crucial transportation and freight routes in northwest England. Our adventures will take us from Alston to Guilderdale, from Ravenglass to Eskdale, and around the Steamport Southport Museum and Railway, and on to Manchester. We'll also ride an antique tramway and antique trolleys in Blackpool. We'll visit famous railway museums, see a lakeside setting that inspired famed poet William Wordsworth, ride a tramway trimmed with dazzling lights, see a locomotive imported from South Africa, and enjoy the beautiful northwest English countryside. Our railway adventure includes travel on the South Tyndale Narrow Gauge Railway, the Ravenglass and Eskdale Miniature Railway, and both the East and West Lancashire Railways. All aboard for glory days.
For our railway adventure, it's a step back in time as we climb aboard restored rail lines from the early 19th century. In northwestern England, a series of these working antiques are easily accessible from Britain's M6 highway. At one time, these trains were used for both freight and passenger service. Now, they make great side trips for adventurous travelers. The trip begins in Alston. From there, it's south on England's M6 highway, with stops at several towns that are home to some very unique and interesting railroads, before reaching our final destination, Blackpool. Alston is home of the narrow-gauge South Tyndale Railway. Passengers are ready to board the steam locomotive called Chaka's Crawl No. 6. The crew makes final preparations before the train is ready to depart. In the early 1980s, the line became a tourist railway and was relayed from standard gauge to the narrow 2-foot gauge now used. It was reopened in July 1983. The train runs along a retaining wall above the rivers Nant and South Tyne, then heads out to the gentle countryside. Chaka's Crawl blasts out a warning as she crosses a country road. You never know if 4 legs or 4 wheels might cross the tracks. Gently drifting into Guilderdale, the train stops to prepare for the trip back to Alston. Chaka's Crawl is a unique locomotive. It was built in 1940 for use in South Africa, despite the fact the factories were busy producing military materials for the enormous demands of World War II. The little yellow diesel locomotive is a temporary necessity. It provides air for the brakes on the train until an air pump is installed on Chaka's Crawl. With all the preparations made, the train heads back to the depot in Alston. Alston hasn't always been the home station of Chaka's Crawl. The locomotive was repatriated in 1977 by the North Gloucestershire Narrow Gauge Company, and it's now on extended loan to the South Tyndale Railway. Pulling 3-passenger cars is easy work for this little engine. The experience of this unique narrow-gauge railway is a favorite for locals and tourists. Heading back to Alston, Chaka's Crawl concludes its round trip through the English countryside. But our railway adventure of England's unique tourist railways has just started. South of Alston, at the town of Ravenglass, is the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway, located on the west coast of the Lake District, a 30-mile-wide national park. On the turntable of the 7-mile railway, the miniature locomotive called Northern Rock is being turned around after its arrival at the station. This railroad, built in 1875, was originally used to carry iron ore on its 3-foot gauge line. But in 1915, it was taken over by the famous model engineer W.J. Bassett Loke and his partner R.P. Mitchell. They converted it to its present 15-inch gauge. These authentic working engines and rail cars are actually 1/5 scale from full-size trains. In the train shed, 2 more locomotives are preparing for a run. Here in the workshop, the crew is building another train called Northern Rock 2 for export to Japan. For a glimpse of more historic trains, the Ravenglass Railways Museum is a popular stop. Railway enthusiasts come from all over the world to tour the museum. Back on the train and with preparations complete, the 262 Northern Rock departs Ravenglass. The 262 refers to the number of wheels in each of the 2 or 3 sets on a locomotive. The first stop on the line is at historic Muncater Mill, now renovated and open to the public. Northern Rock is just one of the many locomotives on the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway. Another popular engine is the Rivermite. This line is famous not only for its 15-inch gauge, but also for its radio signaling. The line was the first in Britain to adopt radio communication. The train continues on its 40-minute 7-mile journey through the English countryside on the edge of the Lake District. The scenery of the lakelands inspired the poetry of William Wordsworth. As we reach the Eskdale-Dalegarth station, Northern Rock's final stop, the train is turned around once more in preparation for the return trip to Ravenglass. Unlike its full-size counterparts, it only takes 2 men to work the turntable here. We'll leave the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway and head back to the M6 highway and south to Carnforth. The depot in Carnforth was built by Italian prisoners of war in 1942. About 25 years later, it was closed. But a group of train enthusiasts revived the spirit of the railway. Today, mainline locomotives are displayed here at the famous Steamtown Railway Museum. Many of the locomotives are temporarily on display before heading off to their next assignment. This locomotive is about to report for duty on the settled Carlisle line, another Railway Adventures destination. Tucked away in a corner of Lancashire County is a narrow-gauge railway with a history and character all its own. Built in 1957, the railway was the brainchild of 6 schoolboys. They rented this site from the adjoining brick factory so they could carry out their dream, to own their own railway. Thus was born the 2-foot gauge West Lancashire Railway. The locomotive was built in Berlin in 1913. It arrived at the railway in 1984 after working at a coal mine in Spain. It's part of a large collection of steam and diesel locomotives now owned by the West Lancashire Railway. Back on the M6 highway, it's south, then west to the coastal town of Southport. Southport is the home of the Steamport Southport Museum and Railway. The rail line in this area was once owned by British Railways. Today it's home to a collection of steam, road, and rail exhibits restored to working order. The Preservation Society negotiated with British Rail and began restoration in 1973. The following year, the museum was opened to the public. At England's Steamport Southport Museum and Railway, the day begins early. Before visitors arrive, the exhibits are driven out of the shed and prepared for display. But the trains aren't just for display. Visitors can enjoy a short train ride around the museum. Today, passengers are riding the St. Monin steam engine, a 100-horsepower, four-wheel steam locomotive with a vertical boiler. All different forms of steam-powered engines are on display at Steamport. Here in the shop, work continues as the classic trains are renovated and restored. Southport is also home to the East Lancashire Railway. By 1846, the builders of the original East Lancashire Railway worked long and hard erecting bridges, carving tunnels, and laying tracks. Little did they know that 150 years later, their vision would be kept alive by a band of railway enthusiasts. Today, preservation efforts like this can be seen all over the world. The railway provides both education and entertainment while traveling through a valley rich in history. Once prepared, the locomotive known as Gothenburg leaves the station shed with its coaches. Passengers are already waiting at the platform for the first departure of the day. Gothenburg leaves from the Bolton Street station in Southport and immediately enters the 80-yard-long Bolton Street Tunnel. Crossing the River Irwell, the train steams past row houses toward several more tunnels. Next, the train plunges into the 1,260-foot-long Brooks Bottom Tunnel. It emerges briefly, then enters the 350-foot-long Nuttall Tunnel. Coming out of the tunnel, Gothenburg is within sight of the next stopping point at Ramsbottom Station. The train slows to a halt at the restored depot. Gothenburg, built in 1903 by Hudswell Clark of Leeds, was originally one of a fleet of powerful locomotives serving the railway system of the Manchester Ship Canal. Now privately owned, Gothenburg forms part of a large collection of working industrial locomotives that include former British Rail steam, diesel, and diesel-electric rolling stock. The thirsty locomotive is filled with water and is coupled to another set of rail cars backwards. From here, the restored rails go another 4 miles to Rawtenstall. But our train heads west to Manchester, home of the Science and Industry Museum. Here at the museum, fascinating displays of machinery make up the largest collection in England. Inside the Science and Industry Museum in Manchester, England, is the country's tribute to power. In the 18th and 19th centuries, there was an enormous demand for power in many forms. Steam and gas engines on display in the museum's Power Hall were developed in all sizes and shapes and styles. Some engines weigh over 200 tons, but still fit on a 3-foot, 6-inch track. England led the world during the Industrial Age, and the museum is a testament to the advances made here. The Beaver Peacock steam locomotive is only half the engine it used to be, in order to demonstrate the principles of a steam locomotive. It's been cut in half to show the intricate workings and the power of steam. Returning to the M6 highway, we then head west to our final destination, Blackpool. This coastal town is an English favorite. The sounds of a Wurlitzer organ add to the carnival atmosphere here. As early as 1885, visitors began trekking to Blackpool for its many amusements. Though not a restored train, the unique trolley cars are an institution that could not be left out of our railway adventure. The antique tramway is still the best way to see the sights. It's both a service and entertainment enjoyed by thousands of visitors. Today, the line hosts Bolton Corporation's Tramway number 66, which contrasts with the modern high-capacity twin units. Part of the oldest surviving tramway, car number 634, was built by the Brush Company. It glides by, as it always has, since around 1940. Even though there are so many things to do here during the day, it's when the sun sets that Blackpool really comes alive. The colorful, bright lights and the music of the Wurlitzer organ are synonymous with Blackpool. It has a special magic that appeals to visitors of all ages from all parts of the world. And the trams add to the atmosphere by dressing up for the occasion. Their lights are a fitting tribute to this railway adventure.
By restoring railways, the English preserve more than a piece of the past. Each restored line is an investment in their future, one that ensures a healthy tourist trade for years to come. We hope you've enjoyed Glory Days. I'm Bernie Coppell. Join me on the next Railway Adventures Across Europe. On this railway adventure, Britain's best preserved Norman castle, a 6,000-year-old stone circle that may be related to Stonehenge, and the Rare Breed Survival Trust on the Settle Carlisle Railway. Hi, I'm Bernie Coppell. Just up the tracks, Lady Anne's favorite castle and the Acorn Bank. Join us from Kirkby Stephen to Carlisle on Railway Adventures Across Europe. What do castles, cathedrals, and Long Meg and her daughters have in common? We'll discover them all on our railway adventure through the northern English countryside. We'll begin our adventure in Kirkby Stephen, just over 200 miles northwest of London. Then we'll travel along the Pennine Peaks to Carlisle, our final destination. As we travel this picturesque route, we'll visit Lady Anne Clifford's favorite castle, now the best preserved Norman castle in Europe. We'll see Long Meg and her daughters, a 6,000-year-old monument that may be related to Stonehenge. We'll also pass through villages that seem unchanged by centuries of progress. See a castle built by Henry I and learn what's being done to preserve English wildlife and history. Every mile of track along the Settle Carlisle Railway and the South Tynedale Railway is a sight to behold. And on this adventure, we'll be riding both. All aboard for castles, kings, and trains.
Our railway adventure takes us just over 200 miles northwest of London as we travel from the market town of Kirkby Stephen to the city of Carlisle. To travel by train along the Settle Carlisle line is to experience the beauty of northern England, passing along England's wild Pennine Peaks, known as the backbone of the country. There's lots to see and discover. Add steam trains to the rich heritage of medieval castles, quiet villages, and wild plants and animals, and you've got the opportunity for an unforgettable adventure. It begins as we travel by rail through the wild Mallerstang Valley, named after the peaks surrounding it, into the market town of Kirkby Stephen. This is a handsome town, once famous for its fairs, markets, and pubs. Next to the cobbled market square is a series of buildings called the Cloisters. Built in 1810, the cloisters were often used as a butter market. Market rules are still on display here. The Cloisters is a parish church, but its size has earned it the title Cathedral of the Dales. This part of northwest England is referred to as the Dales, named for the surrounding peaks, and the people here are called Dalesmen. Just a short walk from Kirkby Stephen is Stencrett. Here the River Eden plunges through a rocky gorge. Mature shade trees surround the area. The river heads all the way to Carlisle with a train crossing and recrossing it. On the other side of town, the scenery changes. Smaردale Viaduct is the tallest bridge on the rail line. It crosses the Scandalbeck and the lines of an old railroad called Tebbe. Soon, we'll be crossing it on the way to Carlisle. From Kirkby Stephen, it's about 9 miles to our next stop, Appleby. On the approach into the country town of Appleby, we go through a hamlet called Great Ormside. Sycamore trees surrounded by stone steps were once the site of the cheese and butter market. Now, it's a nice spot to relax. Nearby, the Church of St. James looks down on the village from its grassy knoll. From here, we also see the Ormside Bridge, carrying passengers over the River Eden and into Appleby, in the county of Cumbria. The charming country town is full of character. The main street, Burrowgate, is home for cafes, shops, and the marketplace. At the end of the street stands St. Lawrence, an early English church from the Norman times. A monument called the High Cross at the head of Burrowgate was erected by Jack Robinson, an 18th century member of Parliament. The biggest attraction in Appleby is its castle. Lady Anne Clifford, who lived here in the 17th century, regarded Appleby as the favorite of all her 6 castles. The castle is set on a landscaped hilltop and is considered to be the best preserved Norman castle in Britain. The Great Hall near the castle was home of the Clifford family for nearly 700 years. Today it's a training and conference center, but some of the artifacts from the days of Lady Anne Clifford are still on display for visitors. From suits of armor to coats of arms, the visit is a trip back in time. The land around the castle and its many rooms and chambers are perfectly preserved. Even some of the interior rooms are detailed to the era of Lady Anne. This fine porcelain dinner service from China was added when it was salvaged from the Nanking in the South China Sea in 1986. The grounds of the castle are now an animal sanctuary, handled by the Rare Breeds Survival Trust. Unusual and rare breeds of domestic farm animals, birds, and fish are safely protected here. The Trust works to ensure that no more breeds become extinct. As the Eden Valley broadens into a wide, fertile plain, the hills of England's Lake District can be seen. But our next stop along the line is in Langwathby. Langwathby is a charming country village 9 miles north of Appleby. Here, the whitewashed houses and green lawns offer a glimpse of a quiet country life. This, too, is a place untouched by time. The quiet life of the Dalesmen hasn't changed much over the generations. Not far from Langwathby, near the Settle Carlisle railway line, is the village of Little Salkeld with its working antique watermill. A mill stood on this site for over 200 years. Visitors can watch the mill at work. It operates with its original machinery. The quaint little mill is also a great place to stop for lunch. Just above Little Salkeld stand Long Meg and her daughters, the name for this 6,000-year-old stone circle. While Long Meg may not be as well known as Stonehenge, it's just as interesting and mysterious. For a quick side trip, we'll take the road from Langwathby, east over the Pennine Ridge, to Alston. Alston is England's highest market town and home of the South Tyndale Railway. The old branch line was reopened in 1983 and is England's highest narrow-gauge railway. Passengers come to ride in the open-air cars and tour the wild countryside of northern England. On the way back to Langwathby and the Settle-Carlisle line, the views are most impressive. From here, the Eden Valley spreads out below us. Before we rejoin the railway, there's time to visit Acorn Bank. The gardens here are owned and protected by the National Trust. Visitors come to see their extensive collection of medicinal and culinary herbs. They have over 250 different types growing here. The many herbs and wildflowers are sheltered behind 17th century walls. The combination is wild and beautiful. Back on the Settle-Carlisle Railway, the train heads north. Next stop, Lazenby, about 6 miles away. From Lazenby, there are places to explore in all directions. Walking south along the banks of the River Eden, we come to Lacey's Caves. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Lacey had these chambers carved out of the sandstone cliff as an exercise in 18th century romantic landscaping. Rumor has it that Lacey also employed a hermit to live in the caves and give them an authentic appearance. They're a favorite for tourists and locals. On the Settle-Carlisle Railway, not far from Lazenby, are the Nunnery Walks. The walks are a series of footpaths through the beautiful Croglan Gorge. Dating from the 1700s, these paths wind and twist through the rocky gorge without disturbing the perfection of nature. From Lazenby, the train tracks lead to Armathwaite. This quiet English village is surrounded by hills and woods, offering an inspiration to the artists and craftsmen who call it home. Local crafts are displayed for sale to visitors. Yet another bridge over the River Eden shows magnificent views of the river. On the far right stands a castle, mostly hidden by woods. Now the train takes the last leg of the journey north. It's about 8 miles to Carlisle, a border city between Scotland and England. The city has had a long and turbulent history. Attacked and occupied by Romans, Danes, English, and Scots, it was besieged as late as 1745. Because of this, it was protected by the military until the early years of the last century. Large towers and old cannons tell the story of its fortification. 11th century walls built to protect Carlisle are well preserved. To discover the entire history of the city, go to the Tully House Museum. The exhibits inside explain the details. Outside you'll find ancient Roman ruins. The grounds are also a good place to relax and enjoy the city. Carlisle Castle was begun by Henry I of England and completed by David of Scotland, who regarded Carlisle as his southern capital. Today it's home to the Museum of the King's Own Royal Regiment. The old walls and castles of Carlisle's medieval past mix well with more current architecture. It's a quaint city of alleys and walkways. But the pride of the city goes to the cathedral. This magnificent piece of Norman architecture is called the Holy and Undivided Trinity. Volunteers guide visitors through the church and answer questions about its history. Outstanding features like the vaulting, the stained glass, and the painted ceiling make it a spectacular grand finale on our adventure. For the return trip south, what better way to travel than by steam train? But that's another adventure all its own on the Settle Carlisle Railway.
We've discovered ancient history and timeless beauty on our railway adventure from Kirkby Stephen to Carlisle. We hope you've enjoyed castles, kings, and trains. I'm Bernie Coppell. Join me on the next Railway Adventures Across Europe. On this railway adventure, England's Iron Horse, the afternoon tea train, and the village that inspired Wuthering Heights, all on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. Hi, I'm Bernie Coppell. Just up the tracks, a locomotive made in the USA, still serving England, and the iron rails that fired the Industrial Revolution. Join me from Keighley to Oxenhope on Railway Adventures Across Europe. After 95 years of faithful service, the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway fell silent. But thanks to the enormous efforts of a determined preservation society, the railway is now one of the most famous rail lines operating in England today. It has a fleet of 30 locomotives and a history that dates back over 100 years. On our railway adventure, we'll ride a thundering locomotive through Worth Valley on one of England's iron roads of the Industrial Revolution. We'll ride into history, to the age of steam and an era when Edwardian-style stations were lit by gas lamps. will depart from the industrial town of Keighley along the Worth River and stop at several stations with names like Ingrow West, Damons, and Oakworth before reaching our final destination of Oxenhope. Stay with us as we explore the village where the Bronte sisters found inspiration to write their famous novels Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, later made into movies. All aboard for Silence of the Iron Horse.
No one knows who first discovered the power of steam, but by the end of the 18th century, steam trains were moving people and freight throughout England. The Iron Horse, the name given to locomotives in the early age of railways, quickly developed into a mainstay of transportation. By the middle of the 19th century, it had blazed its way across Britain, delivering prosperity to cities and villages along its lines. On this railway adventure, we'll explore the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, one of England's most famous lines still in operation today. Inhospitable moorlands or marsh wastelands form natural barriers between the English counties of York and Lancaster. Between the moors and the lowlands are fertile valleys which sprawl across the British countryside. The Worth Valley stretches southwest from the industrial town of Keighley in West Yorkshire and follows the River Worth into the Pennine Chain Mountain Range. These valleys in England provided a natural course for the iron rails that fired the Industrial Revolution. The Worth Valley heard its first locomotive steam whistle in November of 1866, and by April of 1887, a line through to Oxenhope was finally opened. But when England converted its steam locomotives to diesel in 1955, an era of transportation history ended. After 95 years of faithful service, the Worth Valley Railway fell silent. A group of local enthusiasts then formed a preservation society to save the steam railway from extinction in England. Thanks to the group's concentrated efforts, almost 102 years after the first opening ceremony, the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway triumphantly returned to regular steam service. In June of 1968, the railway celebrated a grand reopening and the first train steamed out of Keighley. From these modest beginnings, the service, run entirely by volunteers, now attracts more than 150,000 passengers a year from throughout the world, and many more visitors who just come to watch the steam trains thunder by. Our railway adventure on the Worth Valley Railway begins from the station at the northeast corner of the Keighley town center, where it shares the depot with British Rail mainline trains. We then wind our way southwest on an uphill climb toward Oxenhope. The Worth Valley side of Keighley Station was also abandoned for many years, but has been rebuilt since the branch reopened. A fresh coat of paint, a new restaurant, electric lights, and modern conveniences have all revitalized this historic building. The Worth Valley Railway uses platforms 3 and 4 at the station.
Train now approaching platform 4 is 10:05 to Oxenhope, calling at Oakworth, Howard and Oxenhope. This train will also call at Ingrow West and Damon by request of the guard.
The steam locomotive, nicknamed Vulcan, steams into the station to collect its first group of passengers. The beautifully restored locomotive is a direct descendant of a model that once worked on the Worth Valley branch for many years. Built in 1924, this engine is one of the last survivors from the 420 locomotives that were originally built to serve the London, Midland, and Scottish railways. Number 47279 was among a handful found at a scrapyard in 1979. A small group of Worth Valley members created a fund to save the 060 locomotive. The 060 refers to the wheel configuration on steam engines. With passengers aboard, we depart from the railway's northern boundary, crossing the River Worth and passing through the industrial area of town toward Ingrow. For the first mile, the Great Northern Railway uses the same route for its Keighley to Bradford and Halifax branches. The first stop out of Keighley will be Ingrow West. The station building was originally constructed in the town of Fowleridge in Lancashire County. It was dismantled and transported to Ingro, where it was rebuilt and stands today. We're back on our railway adventure across England on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. Leaving the Ingro station, the Worth Valley Rail Line will plunge into a short tunnel that separates the open valley from the narrow, steep hillsides. Shortly after we emerge from the tunnel, the line starts to climb swiftly, twisting like a snake alongside the River Worth. We'll pass Damon's, which is just a mile beyond Ingro, and the smallest station on the line, quite possibly in the entire country. With just a tiny station house and a small platform, Damon's is only able to handle the loading or unloading of one coach at a time. Just beyond Damon's is one of the major construction accomplishments of the Worth Valley Company. A passing track was built after railway traffic began to outgrow the single line. Now, two opposite trains can operate simultaneously. Trains are controlled from a signal box that was opened in 1973. This hand-operated signal was originally installed at Oakworth and eventually moved to Damon's. As the train passes, tokens are exchanged between the signalman and engineer. Tokens are train orders and instructions identifying track conditions and train speed. Continuing to climb, our train enters a narrow cutting and emerges around a bend that leads on to Oakworth Station, or Stop as the British call their train stations. The station building at Oakworth provides a typical example of West Yorkshire station design and has retained its original look over the years. While most other stations on the line have been modernized, gas lamps, Edwardian posters, and a well-manicured garden all contribute toward the old-world atmosphere that is so well preserved at Oakworth Station. The historical preservation efforts at Oakworth Station were recognized in 1979 when it was awarded first prize in the Best Preserved Station competition presented by Sir Parker, chairman of British Rail. Just a short stop, though, and we're on our way again, headed to the town of Haworth. Traveling over the level crossing and out of Oakworth, the train passes a heavily wooded curve, then over a short bridge and into Mytholm's Tunnel. Once out of the tunnel, the train curves around a hillside and into Haworth. The station is also headquarters for the Worth Valley Railway Company. Our railway adventure continues in Haworth, where the station has been completely refurbished to its original 1800s appearance. Like the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, the English village of Haworth appears today as it has for over a century. This old village on a hill is famous primarily due to one family. It was in these surroundings the three Bronte sisters, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne, found inspiration for writing several books. The books, Wuthering Heights, written by Emily, and Jane Eyre, written by Charlotte, were both made into well-known movies. Even more remarkable is that the sisters published in their own names at a time when women were forced to use men's names for fear their work would be ignored by society. You'll find a museum dedicated to the literature of the Bronte sisters in the parsonage opposite the village church. Pulling out of the Haworth station, our train will continue to climb gently. The tracks now pass through open country for the trip to Oxenhope. Over this section, the rail line follows the valley floor in an almost straight line. The engineer keeps a full head of steam in the vintage locomotive's boilers. One last curve, and the railway reaches Oxenhope Station at the northern end of the village. Though we've arrived at our final destination, our exploration of the railway has just begun. The Oxenhope train yard was run down and overgrown prior to restoration in 1968. Now there's a large covered museum where locomotives and coaches are on public display when the rail line is in operation. The yard also provides space for the maintenance and reconditioning of train cars. Even though the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway is not running the original locomotives and passenger cars, it still maintains a definite period look. The railroad believes that the steam train is in itself a unique period piece regardless of its origin. The large varied fleet of 30 locomotives built between 1874 and 1961 were purchased from Glasgow, Newcastle, and Leeds in England, and even Pennsylvania in the United States. They include steam and diesel locomotives. The labor required to maintain these amazing machines is never-ending. Cleaning out the boilers is just one of the many tasks performed by the volunteer workers. Thanks mainly to the hard work of the original owners, many locomotives and coaches were preserved and are still in working order today. Even trolley cars can be found working on the railway. Due to the severe nature of the terrain, locomotives that carry passengers are chosen by their age and size. The railway boasts a variety of preserved rolling stock. The industrial locomotives which spent their working lives on obscure sidings have not been forgotten. Several are in use today on the Keighley and Worth Valley, which we'll see later. All along the line, especially in spring, the railway hosts a number of weekend celebrations for rail fans and enthusiasts. Many of the historic steam locomotives are featured in all their power and glory. On a Saturday, early morning travelers gather on Haworth platform to greet the oldest locomotive on the railway, the Belrophon. Built in 1874 at the Haydock Foundry, it is an 060 well tank locomotive and is being assisted on the early train by number 30072, Southern Railways USA. We continue our adventure on England's famous Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. At Oakworth, engine number 30072 pulls in during a spring shower with the afternoon tea special to Oxenhoe. Rain or shine, afternoon tea is not to be missed. What better way to enjoy this nostalgic English tradition than on a steam train? The railway keeps a precise timetable for all its trains and passengers. It's still raining as the train arrives in Oxenhoe. Not even the wet English weather can dampen the spirit of the passengers. The departure to Haworth causes a great deal of interest. Locomotives almost outnumber the coaches, as a steam locomotive is joined by a British Rail diesel engine to power our train. This could only happen during a railroad enthusiast weekend. The engines do their train talk before departing. In other action on this busy railway, the Great Western Pannier tank thunders up the valley out of Keighley. The engine will double head, that is, join with another locomotive to pull the Oxenhoe train. At Oakworth, number 31, named Hamburg, an ex-Manchester Ship Canal's 060 side tank has been waiting patiently on the siding to join the front of the 1115 Keighley to Oxenhoe train. The two locomotives are coupled and present a spectacular sight powering their way into the station at Oakworth. An engineer checks with the station master to get instructions for the trip. All aboard, and we leave the station for Oxenhoe. Back at the yard in Haworth, one of the largest locomotives owned by the railway has been preparing to make its run. This giant World War II veteran, the USA, dwarfs the Pannier tank engine it's about to join in a double-headed run to Keighley. The sudden weather changes are well known in the Yorkshire valleys. A spring snow started to fall as the afternoon tea special arrives from Oakworth, providing a picturesque finale to our railway adventure on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway.
In keeping with English tradition, afternoon tea is not to be missed, rain or shine. The afternoon tea special steams down the line thanks to the all-volunteer staff that services over 150,000 passengers a year. I'm Bernie Coppell. Join me on the next Railway Adventures Across Europe.
See you on the next World's Greatest Train Ride Video Adventure.